You wake up before the alarm again. Your body knows the schedule better than the clock. 13 years, same routine, same company. On paper, you're winning. Good salary, benefits, stability. Yet you're earning more than your parents ever did. And somehow you feel tighter, not freer. This isn't bad luck. It isn't poor discipline. It's a system built to keep you comfortable enough to stay and busy enough to never escape. You tell yourself this is what security looks like: a steady paycheck, health insurance, a calendar filled weeks in advance. You've learned how to function inside it so well that your body wakes up before the alarm, as if it's afraid to be late for a life it didn't consciously choose. At first, the salary felt like relief, proof that you'd made it, proof that the years of effort were worth something. But relief has a strange way of fading when it becomes routine. That's where Megan comes in. She's 34 years old. She earns $85,000 a year. Statistically, she's doing better than most people around her. On paper, she's successful. In reality, she feels like she's constantly one small surprise away from panic. Every 2 weeks, her paycheck arrives. The number looks respectable at first glance, until the system quietly steps in before she can make a single decision. Her money doesn't arrive as freedom, it arrives already spoken for. Rent takes its share immediately, almost half of what she actually brings home. Food drains another portion, spread across small, forgettable transactions. A car payment here, insurance there, fuel, subscription she barely remembers signing up for, utilities, phone bills. By the time she mentally registers that she's been paid, nearly everything is gone. What's left isn't enough to feel empowering, but it's just enough to feel normal. That's the first trick. The system doesn't make you feel poor, it makes you feel functional. You have a place to live, you can eat out occasionally, you can replace things when they break. You don't feel deprived, so you don't feel alarmed. And because you don't feel alarmed, you don't question the structure. Money arrives in a lump, but it leaves in fragments, so your brain never experiences the full weight of loss. You're always busy managing life, never stopping to ask why the numbers never move forward. What you actually have isn't wealth, it's maintenance, a lifestyle that requires constant input just to stay upright. And as long as you can maintain it, the system feels generous. It rewards consistency, not independence. It gives you comfort without leverage, stability without control. You're not drowning, but you're not swimming either. You're treading water, expending energy just to stay in the same place. This is where dependency quietly forms, not through force, but through design. You were told to prepare yourself, so you invested in education. Maybe you took on debt to do it. Then you found a job to justify that investment, a decent salary, a sense of arrival. But the moment you accepted that role, something invisible snapped into place. Your life adjusted itself around the income without asking permission. Expenses rose to meet the paycheck, not because you were reckless, but because the system framed it as progress. A nicer apartment felt earned, a better car felt reasonable, small upgrades felt like rewards. Each decision made sense on its own. Together, they built a structure that required your continued presence to survive. And once that structure exists, leaving stops being a choice and starts feeling like a threat. You don't notice the cage forming because it's lined with comfort. You just feel busy, responsible, needed. And that's exactly how the trap tightens without ever looking like one. This is where it gets darker, because once your life is calibrated to a paycheck, the paycheck becomes non-negotiable. You don't work for growth anymore. You work to prevent collapse. Economists call it lifestyle inflation, but that phrase makes it sound accidental. It isn't. It's predictable human behavior inside a predictable structure.
You earn $60,000, and suddenly an $800 apartment feels temporary. You upgrade to $1,200 because you can. You replace a reliable car with a nicer one because you've earned it. Then the salary rises again, $90,000, a better neighborhood, a newer model, a vacation you wouldn't have taken before. Each raise feels like momentum. Each decision feels justified, but none of them create distance from risk. They reduce it. What actually happens is subtle. Your freedom shrinks while your obligations harden. You don't notice it because your comfort is increasing at the same time. But comfort isn't freedom. Comfort is compliance that feels pleasant. The moment your expenses require your income to stay exactly where it is, you've lost leverage. You can't leave, you can't pause, you can't experiment. You need the system to keep functioning exactly as it is. This is how golden handcuffs are forged, not by force, by reward. You weren't trapped, you were promoted. You weren't controlled, you were congratulated. And because progress is defined as moving up, not pulling away, you kept climbing into a structure that consumes everything you earn. That's why income alone never determines freedom. The gap does, the space between what comes in and what goes out. Close that gap, and even a large salary behaves like a small one. A person earning $500,000 a year can be just as constrained as someone earning $50,000 if their life requires nearly all of it to function. Different numbers, same stress, same dependency. David learned this the hard way. He worked in tech, 6 figures, solid career. On the surface, he looked successful. Inside, he felt trapped. Every time he imagined quitting, his body reacted before his mind could. Tight chest, dropping stomach. Not fear of failure, but fear of interruption. A mortgage, 2 cars, private school tuition, all of it locked to the continuation of his paycheck. When his company offered a promotion and $20,000 a raise, he felt relief, not excitement. It felt like oxygen. But the relief didn't last. The expenses caught up almost immediately. Housing costs adjusted, medical bills appeared, repairs turned into replacements. The stress didn't disappear, it reset. The number changed, but the pressure stayed exactly the same. That's the system's most effective trick. It convinces you that more income will solve a problem that income itself created. So you chase raises instead of resilience, promotions instead of margin. And as long as your required expenses keep pace, you stay predictable. You show up, you comply, you don't take risks, because risk threatens the structure that keeps everything standing. This is why so many people feel anxious despite earning more than ever before. They aren't failing, they're optimized for dependency. When every dollar already has a destination before it arrives, you don't own your income. You manage obligations on behalf of other people. Your landlord, your bank, your lenders, they benefit from certainty. You absorb the fragility. Ask yourself a simple question. If you stopped working tomorrow, how long could your life continue unchanged? 1 month? 2? Maybe 3 if nothing goes wrong? That isn't security. That's a narrow margin disguised as stability. And when the margin is thin, behavior becomes cautious. You stay quiet. You don't challenge. You don't step outside the lines. This is the moment where most people stop thinking, because recognizing the trap is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit that effort alone isn't enough, that the structure matters more than the salary inside it. But this is also where everything begins to change. Once you see the pattern, you start asking better questions. Not how do I earn more, but why does everything I earn already belong to someone else? Not how do I get promoted, but how do I build something that doesn't collapse the moment I stop working? This shift matters because the salary trap only works as long as income is mistaken for wealth. Income is temporary. It depends on performance, permission, and continuation. Wealth is different. Wealth is what remains when income pauses. Savings, assets, margin, control. A high salary without distance between spending and earning is just motion. It looks impressive, but it doesn't move you anywhere safer. This is why awareness changes behavior. The moment you understand that the trap is structural, not personal, shame loses its grip. You stop blaming yourself for feeling stuck. You stop chasing solutions that keep you running in the same direction. You begin to focus on the gap, the space that actually determines freedom. Keeping expenses intentionally lower than income feels backwards in a culture that celebrates upgrades, but that gap is the only lever that exists. It's the buffer that turns panic into choice. It's what allows you to say no without fear. And when that gap is redirected into assets instead of obligations, something fundamental shifts. Your money starts working quietly instead of disappearing noisily. The psychological change happens faster than the financial one.
The first few months of real margin don't feel dramatic, but then you notice it. Conversations feel different. Decisions feel calmer. You're no longer negotiating from desperation. You can walk away. You can wait. You can choose. This isn't about quitting your job tomorrow. That's not freedom. That's reaction. Freedom is optionality, knowing that if circumstances change, you don't collapse. That if a role stops serving you, you aren't forced to stay. That your life doesn't depend on one narrow stream continuing without interruption. The system never tells you this because it doesn't benefit from independent people. Predictable workers are easier to manage than self-directed ones. A population living paycheck to paycheck, even on large paychecks, is compliant by necessity. They can't pause. They can't step back. They need the next cycle to arrive on time. But the salary trap isn't inescapable. It doesn't require brilliance or luck to exit. It requires clarity. The people who break free aren't special. They simply stop confusing comfort with freedom. They accept short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term control. They build distance before they build lifestyle. Once you recognize that a salary can keep you busy enough to never become independent, you can't unsee it. You start measuring progress differently, not by how much you earn, but by how little you need. Not by how high you climb, but by how easily you could step away. That's the real choice. Comfort that locks you in, or freedom that takes patience. The system will happily give you the first. The second is something you have to build deliberately. And the moment you do, the trap loses its power.